Are we ready? Okay, you just need to do the thing and I'll start the meeting. Thank you. What's your name? I'm sorry. Drew? Okay, thank you, Drew. Good evening and welcome to the City of Sharonville's council meeting. If everyone would please rise, we are going to have a moment of silent prayer and then the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Mark Pietmeyer will be leading us in this. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You can all be seated. Roll call, Mrs. Buhey.
Mr. Tankersley,
Here.
Mr. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Lippert,
Here.
Mr. Duda,
Here.
Mr. Cook,
Here.
Mrs. Knight, here, Mr. Schmidt.
Here.
Thank you. Approval of the October 13th, 2020 regular council meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes you received? Seeing none, those stand as written as approved. Reports and communication, Mayor Hardman.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thanks to our friends at Spectra and our convention center staff. If you haven't managed to get over to one of the Sunday brunches, they're doing a fantastic job in presenting that and giving some continued support for our convention center during this time. So those are continuing Sunday mornings from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. There's plenty of social distance that is in existence in the ballroom.
Yeah.
They're taking all precautions that they can to make sure you're safe as they're serving you. My wife ate inside for the first time since March at a restaurant, so or at a dining establishment. So she felt comfortable enough. Hopefully, if anyone else has those concerns, they can as well. But it's a great opportunity for any of you, for any of the public who might be watching us. We encourage them to get over to Chester Road and enjoy that at the convention center. We made a couple of decisions this week with regard to events that normally happen in the next coming months here in the city of Sharonville. One of them is Veterans Day. We are in conversations with the school. It has been the tradition that is actually Sharonville Elementary School that actually leads the observance at Patriot Point that we've had on Veterans Day. Normally they have a luncheon for veterans, followed by a program at the school, and then they walk down to finish the program at Patriots Point. It does not appear that that is going to be happening with the elementary school, so we encourage folks to appropriately observe Veterans Day as they see fit for Veterans Day, and hopefully, just like so many other observances, we'll have 2021 is going to be a grand experiment as we get back hopefully to normal by then. Also, our usual horse-drawn carriage rides that go through the loop during December. We've decided to put the halt to those this year. The only real safe way to do them would have been to limit them to one family per carriage ride, which would have left us something around 20 to 30 families that would have been able to participate in that event. We didn't feel like asking folks to congregate for an event of that nature and then go around to the businesses as we have done over the past several years was the best idea. So Anna is working on some ideas that we can try to encourage folks to continue to solicit our loop and small businesses during the holiday season. So something akin to our food train event. Try to encourage folks to visit our small businesses during this time. And then, as we've given out those ornaments. This would be a way for them to ultimately collect an ornament. If you frequent one of our downtown businesses, our loop businesses, kind of to still do something that we've done to help support those small businesses during this time. Speaking of small businesses, we have our small business grant program that we are using our CARES fund money for. I believe it was about 24 responses we received back from small businesses requesting assistance through that program. So it appears that at least as of right now, we'll be able to meet the demand that is out there for the money that we have available that you have appropriated through the CARES Act in order to meet some of those needs. We're going through them right now to see and make sure that they are all meeting the criteria that we have put into place in order for them to make use of those services. And we would encourage it. There was an initial deadline. It's a rolling deadline. So if there are still businesses that you're aware of, or people that have talked to you that, people are always going to not, we tried our best to get the information out. But there are obviously going to be some folks that I didn't know about that, or I didn't hear about that. So we want you to talk that up and certainly share it with your neighbors and share it with the small businesses that you frequent, especially those that you might hear are having a hard time. Encourage them to submit the application or get one from us so that we can reach out. That's the purpose of this money, is to help them get back on their feet and make sure that as we manage our way through this pandemic, on the other side of it, all of those great businesses that were flourishing before continue to flourish. So we want to do our best to make sure that happens. Other than that, I'm open to any questions that you might have, but that's all I have to formally report tonight.
Any questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our Safety Service Director, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you. Before we get into the legislation, one update regarding our FEMA project downtown. Between the last meeting and this meeting, we did hear back from FEMA, or actually OEMA, and did get the year extension request that we asked for. So March 2022 is now the projected construction date to be completed by.
Great.
Going into the legislation, Council has 11 pieces this evening in front of them to vote on. The first item is Resolution 2020 R17E, which is our proposed OPWC project for this year. The deadline for that application is November 6th. We are proposing a Kemper Road from Mosteller to Chester Road repaving, curb, and sidewalk project as detailed in the cover memo. Ordinance 2020-37E concerns another OPWC project that we've already gotten grant funds for, the Sharon Road right turn lane project onto Mosteller Road. Law Committee requested that we reach out to Ford to see what their thoughts were on the project, which we did, and Ford is supporting that project. They also have concerns about the backup that their employees have to deal with on a periodic basis and also people who cut through the Ford parking lot. So they are supporting that, and their email is in the council packet as well. Ordinance 2020-39E is a staffing request dealing with our safety forces, and Noah's here this evening to talk about that.
Good evening. As Jim said, Ordinance 2020-39E is dealing with staffing in our emergency services. And basically what this ordinance allows us to do is when the city has received a notice of resignation or retirement from somebody in our safety forces, that we would be able to replace that person up to 3 months early to ensure that we don't have any interruption in services there, that if we have to do training for some of that new staff, we're able to get that started well in advance of that original employee retiring, and to make sure that we don't cause any additional strain during the coronavirus pandemic by having understaffing in either of those departments. It only allows us to do that where we have the dollars in the budget to maintain that staffing, so it's not requesting any additional dollars. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Anyone have a question on it?
I
Thank you,
do.
sir.
No.
Go ahead.
Now, would this cover like if you got one person retiring from one department and bring somebody in 3 months before they retire, or is it more than one person retiring, say within that department at one time?
If there were multiple people who had put in resignations or retirements, it would allow it as a one-for-one replacement.
Okay.
But only where there's an appropriate amount of budgetary dollars still available to do so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2020-40 and 41 both deal with our annual codified ordinance update. In the past, 41 would have been attached to the previous ordinance 40, but this year we separated them out, and I don't know if Mark wants to talk about why we did that, but just a little different tactic this year versus in the past, but it's our annual code update. Ordinance 2020-43E is concerning our CDBG application for this year. It's for projects from 2021 to 23. So if we were lucky enough to get the project, we don't know which year we'll actually get the funding for. I see Michael is online this evening, probably to talk about this, so I'll turn it over to him. Otherwise, I'll address it.
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, go.
Excellent. Thanks for having me here tonight. So the CDBG grant, obviously Jim mentioned, runs in 3-year cycles. So this is 2021 to 2023. There's no guarantee as to what year we may be approved for, but the project that we are going for is the modernization of the elevator at the community center. It's a 24-year-old now. We actually just celebrated our 24th anniversary on Sunday. So it's a 24-year-old commercial elevator. The project cost is estimated at about $110,000, and we're estimating about $22,000 for the design, bidding, and administration costs that will need to go associated with that. CDBG gives us a amount that we should be applying for, and that amount goes between $68K and $77,000. So we'll apply for the maximum that they tell us that we're able to receive, and that money will be used for the modernization of the community center elevator. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Next ordinance 2020-44E, concerns another economic development project that we've been working with Ready Cincinnati on for the last few months. Very exciting project called Project Volcano. Project Volcano is a current business in town, rather large business that's looking to add 104 employees over the next 3 years. They're also looking at potentially $12 million worth of investments in their facility, along with equipment and building renovations. Kevin Donnelly, who grew up in Sharonville, is here representing Ready Cincinnati tonight, and Project Volcano folks are also via Zoom this evening to likely say a few words. But it's two aspects. We're recommending a income tax reimbursement for 4 years at 45%. The 104 employees translates to about a $4.25 million additional payroll. So that's nice. And as well as a TIF amendment that Scott McKeon can talk about as well, and that's 2020 45E. But I'll turn it over to Kevin and the Project Volcano folks, and from what I understand, they'll likely say who they are this evening. So
It's nice to see many familiar faces. Mr. Wilson, long time. As Jim said, my name is Kevin Donnelly with Ready Cincinnati. I'm the director of the project management team. And our mission at Ready Cincinnati, as many of you know, is to help grow the economic environment here in the greater Cincinnati region. And we're so thankful of the partnership that we have with the city of Sharonville, Jim and his staff, mayor, council. I think we've had a lot of good partnerships and projects to date. You know, I entered the economic development field about 4 years ago with Ready Cincinnati, mainly to help with that mission. I wanted to help put my fingerprint on the community that I grew up in. And never has that been more true than tonight with the project here in Sharonville. You know, my parents were born and raised here. I was born and raised here. I was a Sharonville Shark. I was a Princeton Viking. Spent plenty of money at the Blue Goose. And it's nice to be able to, you know, return something back to the community. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Gorilla Glue. I know we're joined here virtually with some folks on the team, and I'll introduce them in just a second. You know, the three of our organizations partnered a few years ago to help land the headquarters of Gorilla Glue. And it turned out to be a good investment, I think, on all our parts, because here we are again, looking for the company to invest another $12 million and hire another 104 employees here in the city of Sharonville. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Michael Ahmed, who's the COO of Gorilla Glue.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, everyone. As Kevin said, I'm Michael Ahmed, the Chief Operating Officer for the Gorilla Glue Company. As we look to expand our operations and make significant investment into our facility, I couldn't be more excited than to be doing this in the city of Sharonville. The city is a growing and a vibrant community that enables us to tap into a large talent pool to fulfill the jobs we need to fuel our growth. I appreciate the partnership and the collaboration with the city council and working with us on this very important project. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you so much. Happy to answer any questions about Ready Cincinnati, our mission, or the company's project, if anyone has any.
Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Good evening. I'll go ahead and kind of follow up right there with Ordinance 2020-45E. This is an amendment to the Gateway 75 TIF that benefits the parcel owned and operated by Gorilla Glue. And this authorizes the Safety Service Director to sign an amended TIF agreement. That amendment is close to being finalized by our staff we have working for us at Squire Sanders. And it will provide a further incentive, 50% of the building improvements that they're doing as part of this expansion. Any questions on that ordinance?
Thank you.
I'll go ahead, touch on Ordinance 2020-46. This is an appropriation ordinance. This is appropriating about $210,000 in a 248 coronavirus relief fund associated with the Hamilton County allocation. So this is in the ordinance. I referenced the resolution from, I think, a meeting or two ago where we passed to apply for this. This is a separate allocation from what the state gave us through the various House and Senate bills of the last few months. And this is in Fund 248, not 249, that we've been keeping the other CARES Act money in. So this will fully appropriate that allocation of money. We will be applying that towards some safety salaries that we have for the services, the time that they've spent out. Safety salaries are an allowable expense for the grant. This is a reimbursement grant, different from the money that the state sent us via the counties already. So we want to go ahead and get that, get this paperwork filed with Hamilton County and make sure this is all going to work and get those funds in hand sooner than later. This will leave Approximately $200,000 to $300,000 of the state allocations of funds to still be appropriated. So if we do have, as I mentioned before, we'll probably come back nearly every meeting the rest of the year with some CARES Act legislation. So if there's anything that we do come up here in the next month or two as we address the virus, there are some funds in place to utilize that. Sort of the unspent rounding portion at the end will be allocating with safety salaries as well. I'll go ahead and cover resolutions 2020 R24E and 25E. This relates to a 45-day notice to Princeton and Lakota schools associated with the proposed 42 corridor TIFs. We've been in negotiations with Princeton about reaching a compensation agreement that would spell out the percentage of TIF proceeds that we would be giving the district, along with waiving this 45 days. So in some cases, we hope that the 45 days is kind of null and void and not necessary. And then with Lakota, if I've mentioned before in Finance and Law Committee, there's a chance that we'll decide that the Lakota TIF, because it's only a single parcel, may not end up being viable or necessary for the project. We may back out on that part, and that may not be needed either. Or we might do a 10-year 75% TIF as opposed to a 30-year TIF that's proposed on the Hamilton County district, and that wouldn't require the 45 days either. So if we do not agree to waive the 45 days with the district, there's a fair chance that we would have to come back and consider having a special meeting late in the calendar year when the 45 days would kind of fall right there that last week of the year. We hope to avoid that, but I wanted to go ahead and put that out there as a remote possibility. This is the first step. We hope to hear back from the school district soon and start to move forward with this in order to get the TIF filed and finalized and start capturing improved values in 2021. Any questions about either of those TIFs?
Anybody? Looks like they got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last piece of legislation, let me get back up here. Ordinance 2020-47E. We recently applied to the counties for some municipal road funds, MRF. MRF funds are funds that the county receives from the sale of license plates and tags. And then you could apply for those for some funding. In Sharonville, we could use those funds for about 20 streets. They're our main thoroughfares. We applied for the Houck Road project, $135,000, and that was awarded. So we have to enter into an agreement with the county, and that's what this legislation does.
Great. Are there any questions? Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, sorry, I did forget. I wanted to go ahead and touch on that first TIF amendment because we had already been talking about Gorilla Glue, but budget books, this is normally the evening where we try to get those out. Those are 99% there. We have some proofing to do to kind of make sure, tie everything back, make sure we didn't overlook anything, and some formatting to get squared away. We will be getting those out probably sometime on Thursday. So we'll send out an email. I think we did this either last year or the year before. So if anybody wants them hand delivered, don't hesitate to ask. We're happy to drop them off or have them available here in admin. So those will be coming out Thursday, and we have the budget work session next Thursday evening. Thanks.
In advance of that, though, as you know, we usually do a budget Q&A, and we'll get that out to you sooner than Thursday, just to get your review going on the budget Q&A.
Thank you. Anybody have questions about that? Thank you. All right, for my report this evening, just a couple reminders. I sent out an email November 2nd. We've been invited to Delta Marriott. I told her around 5:30 works best for everyone's work schedules. If you would like to go on a tour next week at 5:30, we can meet there. That is actually the first day that they're officially open. So that's very exciting. November 3rd, don't forget to vote. And I'm not going to steal Mr. Schmidt's thunder. I'll let him talk about the rest of it. The 5th, we are doing our budget meeting. It starts at 5:30. Dinner will be ready around 5:15-ish. So come early and get your meal and be ready to start talking about budget by 5:30. And I think Scott and I talked about it. I think we're going to kind of keep this set up how we have it, because we're socially distanced. We can talk, we can record it, and it seems to work fairly well. So we'll be doing that. And then our next meeting is November 10th. And I could not remember, Mr. Lucas, is that when they wanted us to tour the firehouse? Or was that the last meeting? That's on November 10th. And is that similar to the police department, like 4 to? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So put all of those on your calendars if you don't mind. And that's my report. Are there any questions for me? Seeing none, we're going to go to our clerk of council, Mrs. Buhite.
No report.
Our auditor's report, Mr. Cunningham.
Good evening, everybody. We are 75% through the year, and we, in our general fund, have spent around 50%, and our fire fund, that's 62%. Now, back to the general fund, you've heard me talk about this in previous meetings, that we're underspent by that much for a good reason, and we held back some capital transfers. And I talked about the possibility of us actually doing that, and we have done that. And so this does not reflect that. So in the tune of about $2.6 million will be transferred, and our working cash, you'll see on there right now, is about 11.8 million, which will be reduced to about 9.2 actually as we speak, which is still above the 7.8 where we want to be. But nevertheless, that transfer has been made. Am I correct, Mr. McKeon? It'll be made in the next week, okay. So by the time we talk about this next month, those numbers will look much different. I still anticipate being a little underspent for the budget, but it'll be a lot closer than we are now. That's my report.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll go to our treasurer, Mr. Irie.
Good evening. You'll see all the auditor's report and the treasurer's report has been submitted to council, and you'll notice quickly that the income tax is down 6.04% from this time last year. The motel tax is down 28.17% from this time last year. You'll also notice, though, in our historical numbers for the last few years, our collections to date are behind the 2019 numbers, slightly behind the 2018 numbers, but again, ahead of the 2016 and 2017 numbers. So that's positive. And pretty much the same thing I've been saying the last several months is that based on our fund estimates coming into this year versus actual collections, our pace for the actual collections tends to hold better than what we actually fund estimated for this year. So that's a good sign for nearly all of the funds.
Great.
So if there's any questions?
Anyone with questions? Seeing none, thank you. We're going to go to our law director, Mr. Pete Meyer. Thank you, sir. And we are canceling the economic development annual report, so there won't be a report for that this evening. Now's an opportunity for anyone in Sharonville that wishes to be heard can come to the podium and speak. You're good. I do want to welcome back Mr. Schmidt. You've been missed. Glad to see you back, sir. Council committees, community development, Mr. Tankersley.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for showing up for our community development budget. It was, the meeting was good. And also,
They didn't raise their hand. I'll ask. Go ahead.
okay. And I've already submitted the community development report to Ms. Buhite.
Perfect. Thank
Thank you.
you. And we noticed that there is a gentleman out on our list here of attendees. If they would like to speak, if you want to raise your hand in the Zoom, we'd be happy to recognize you. Community Services, Mr. Lippert.
Jim, when did you say we'd be getting the budget Q&A stuff?
Tomorrow morning, either tonight or tomorrow morning.
Okay, so let's still have our regular meeting on Wednesday, November 4th, 4 o'clock in the conference room. Mr. Kempe and Mr. Blomer usually have some stuff to review, and on top of that, we can go over the Q&A stuff for both those departments. Thank you.
All right. Budget and Finance, Mr. Cook.
Thank you. Budget and Finance, we went ahead and met on October 21st, and I'll give you a high level of what was discussed. We reviewed the 42 quarter TIF. We discussed the CARES Act. We also went into discussing the Convention Center operating capital budget, the admin operating capital budget. We reviewed the fund balances of the Convention Center Fund, Senior Housing, Capital Fund, Street Funds, and the General Fund. And then anything else we'll discuss during budget time, but that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then Project Oversight?
Yep,
Okay.
please.
Okay, sorry. We will be on hiatus until we get through the budget process, and then we will meet again in January, and we'll bring stuff up prior to that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Honored citizens, Mrs. Knight.
Yes, tonight I'm honoring everyone who participated in the trunk and treat last Tuesday night. Just to mention a few, Sharonville Sharks, Amy Sharpshire had her shark trunk there. The Sharonville Elementary PFO, Sharonville United Methodist Church, Sharonville Police and Fire Department, and the Princeton Sharonville Kiwanis. I'd like to thank Amy Hardman for all the pictures she put on Facebook. They were really quite nice. And I also want to thank the Sharonville Park and Rec for planning such a safe activity.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Law and Public Safety, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you. Our next Law and Public Safety Committee meeting will be on November 5th, and it will be before the budget meeting. We propose to meet at 4:30 here in the council chambers, and what should be a relatively brief meeting. Much of the meeting would be focused on appropriations, and Scott also suggested we also would cover these in the budget presentation, so we're going to kind of combine those and have them together at the budget. So we'll put the appropriations off into the budget where they're very critical to do, and so we can do it all at once. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Rule suspension motion. I need a motion for first and only reading with immediate effectivity. Oh, I'm sorry, before I do that, we do need to amend and accept the amended ordinances and resolutions. 2020-37 has been changed to an emergency, and that's going to be with immediate effectivity. So we're going to read it 2 and 3 and have immediate effectivity. And 2020 R17E is going to have first and only reading with immediate effectivity this evening. Is there a motion to support that? So moved by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Lippert. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, yes. All those opposed, no. And we will go ahead and take those amended ordinances and resolutions. Rule suspension motion for first and only reading, immediate effectivity, ordinances 2020-39E, 2020-43E, 2020-44E, 2020-45E, 2020-46, 2020-47E, resolutions, 2020-R24E, 2020-R25E, and 2020-R17E. For first and only reading with a 30-day effectivity, ordinance 2020-40 and 2020-41. And for a second and third reading with immediate effectivity is ordinance 2020-37E. Is there a motion? So moved by Mr. Cook, second by Mrs. Knight. Is there any discussion on this? Don't make me read it again. All those in favor say yes. Those opposed, no, and that motion is carried. And Mrs. Buhite, you are up with unfinished business.
All right. Third reading of Resolution 2020-R-17E, resolution to appoint a chief executive officer, a chief financial officer, and project manager to submit a state capital improvement program application to the State District Public Works Integrating Committee and authorizing the execution of an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the East Kemper Road Improvement Project and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass resolution 2020-R-17? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Resolution 2020-R-17E has been approved. Ordinance 2020-37E, it's a second reading and the third reading, authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with CT Consultants, Inc. for the engineering and design for the Sharon Road Right Turn Lane and Resurfacing Project.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-37E? So moved by Mrs. Knight, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2020-37E has been approved.
New business, please.
Okay. Just a first reading of ordinance 2020-38E, directing the filing of verified petitions to appropriate various fee simple interests with reservation of access, standard highway easements, and temporary easements as a quick take for the public purpose of improving Hawk Road, a public roadway, open to the public without charge in the city of Sharonville, Hamilton County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. The next is a first and only reading of ordinance 2020-39E. An ordinance to expedite the hiring of emergency responders in the police and fire departments during a declared state of emergency in the city of Sharonville by allowing the Safety Service Director to hire additional emergency responders to offset accepted resignations or retirements of current emergency responders occurring within 3 months.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-39E? So moved by Mr. Duda, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 2020-39E has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-40, enacting the codified ordinance changes provided by the Walter Drain Company.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-40? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
All right, Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-40 has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-41, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as parts of the various component codes of the codified ordinances of Sharonville, Ohio.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-41? So moved by Mrs. Knight, second by Mr. Schmidt. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
All right. Ordinance 2020-41 has been approved. It's a first reading of ordinance 2020-42, authorizing Safety Service Director to enter into a contract with CT Consultants to provide engineering and site plan review for calendar year 2021 and approving CT Consultants' 2021 fee schedule. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-43E, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an agreement of cooperation with Hamilton County, Ohio, pursuant to provisions of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, as amended, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-43E? So moved by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Lippert. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay. Ordinance 2020-43E has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-44E, authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into an economic development incentive agreement for Project Volcano to proceed with a job creation incentive grant and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-44E? So moved by Mrs. Knight, second by Mr. Schmidt. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-44E has been approved. First and only reading, ordinance 2020-45E, to authorize an amendment to the 75 Gateway Building Tax Increment Financing Agreement and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-45E? So moved by Mr. Duda, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Ordinance 2020-45E has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-46, amending 2020 appropriations for the 248 Coronavirus Relief Fund, Hamilton County allocation.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-46? So moved by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Tankersley. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
All right, 2020-46 has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2020-47E, authorizing an agreement between the City of Sharonville and the Board of Hamilton County Commissioners relative to the improvement of Hawk Road.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2020-47E? So moved by Mr. Lippert, second by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 2020-47E has been approved. First and only reading of resolution 2020-R24E, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director or the Finance Director to send requisite statutory notice to the Boards of Education of the Princeton City School District and the Great Oaks Institute of Technology and Career Development of the consideration of an ordinance creating a TIF area to include real property on the 42 corridor and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass resolution 2020-R24E? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mrs. Knight. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 2020-R24E has been approved. Last one, first and only reading of resolution 2020-R25E, a resolution authorizing the safety service director or the finance director to send requisite statutory notice to the boards of education of the Lakota School District and the Great Oaks Institute of Technology and Career Development of the consideration of an ordinance creating a TIF area to include real property in the 42 corridor and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass resolution 2020-R25E? So moved by Mr. Cook, second by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lippert,
Yes.
Mr. Duda,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mrs. Knight,
Yes.
and Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Resolution 2020-R25E has been approved.
And this is another opportunity. Anyone wishing to be heard this evening, our guests on Zoom, if you want to be heard, please just raise your hand. Nothing. Okay. Any other matter? Oh, Mr. Tankersley?
Real quick, on 2020-42, on the it says Michael Blomer, and this is the one for the CT consultants submitted a proposal for the fee schedule. So,
Oh, it
what?
probably just got, it's the cover letter.
Yes,
Probably just didn't change names on it.
okay. Just figured I'd bring it
Yeah,
up.
it's just the cover letter, so it doesn't fall into our stuff. Mayor?
Okay.
So I just wanted, I know Miss Hoppy noticed this on Saturday, and I wanted to make a moment to recognize our partners at the Mill Creek Alliance,
Yeah.
who this past Saturday were on a great little cleanup out at Twin Creek Preserve, keeping that particular hidden gem, if you ask me, of
It
the
is.
city clean and for our entire region. So I want to thank the folks at the Mill Creek Alliance for doing that. And then Kevin, thanks for being here. Thanks for your help and working a great deal. And Michael, I know Nick was on here a little bit earlier from Gorilla Glue. We are very glad to have you as partners here in the city of Sharonville. I think your honors say a lot for that. We weren't, I think it's very clear that Sharonville was not the only place that would have loved to have those 100 jobs. So it's very glad to hear that we were able to work and continue our partnership and welcoming those additional jobs to the city of Sharonville. So Mike, and please thank Nick as well. And Kevin, thank you for your help from Ready.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and we'll pass along the message to Nick.
Thank you. Anyone else for anything else? Mrs. Knight?
Yes, I donated a flag for the Coleman Cemetery because that one was pretty tattered, and I the public works a year ago. They did get it up and it looks great. So the
Good.
Coleman Cemetery is on fire, and I'm not familiar with it, but it doesn't have a path that runs. Goes to the rec center or teaching school.
Great. Thank you very much for your donation. That was nice. Any, Mr. Lippert?
Thank you. I'll try not to ramble. As most of you are aware, my home was broken into on Friday, and I was born and raised in Sharonville, just like many of you, and I've always felt safe here, and a little bit of that was taken away. But I would be remiss if I didn't thank some neighbors and some police officers who are helping to get that back. Paul Schmidt was the first one to my house. He even beat the cops there. So I want to thank my friend, neighbor, and colleague, Mr. Schmidt, my neighbor, Kevin Rolfus, and the Clonnies next door, Officer Livingston was the first on scene. He swept the house with Officer Shane Black. Detective Wilson was primary, and he processed the scene. He's been very instrumental in apprehending a suspect. Detectives Isaacs and Lieutenant Schoonover were there as well. In addition to Sergeant Duddleson, I know Officer Asbrock had contact with this guy, and I'm sure there are a lot of others that I just don't even know about. And I know Detective Kaplinger was instrumental in the search. So thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes. First of all, congratulations, Paul, for driving recklessly over to to beat the police there. So, I'm not sure that's a statement about, but just want to remind anyone that's listening that hasn't done it yet, it's not too late to request an absentee ballot, but after tomorrow, it probably will be pretty dicey because they've got to receive your request, and then you've got to get that absentee ballot in. I think they got to get it back to you by Saturday so that you can get it on Monday. I think those are the dates. So not too late, but for those of you who are motivated by deadlines, we're at it right now. And then the other thing is we talked about how that back early in the year, in February, March, maybe, or April, March or April, we talked about, we anticipated COVID-19 making a little bit more of a comeback in the fall, and I think that we're starting to see that again. And so, you know, as that happens, let's just keep our small businesses in mind and continue to frequent those establishments and maybe build in, you know, one night a week for family to pick up, you know, takeout for dinner. Makes a difference for those folks. That's it. Thank you.
It does. Thank you. Anyone else? I will piggyback off what the mayor said. The breakfast over at the convention center is delicious. It is worth it. Wear your stretchy pants. You're going to want them. I'm going to try to talk the chef into making my Thanksgiving dinner for me because his turkey is spot on. So yeah, it was really, really good. It was very much so worth it. So anyone else have anything for the good of the order? If not, I will take a motion for adjournment. Mr. Tankersley, Mr. Wilson, any discussion on that? All those in favor, yes. Yes. Those opposed, no. And it's so good to see Mr. Pietmeyer vote.
Bye, all.